So I do like and love and use tools and have for more than 20 years. I was a mechanic for a long time. I do woodworking. I'm a homeowner and I do electronics. And one of the big problems with tools is that there's a lot of stuff out there that's gimmicky. Then there's a lot of stuff out there that's great. And it's not always obvious how to distinguish between the two unless you're really in that industry and you're working with people who can help you discover that. I will say that as a mechanic, as a woodworker, and as an electronics person, or whatever you want to call me, I have found that a vise is essentially irreplaceable. It's one of those tools, and not all tools are this way, but it is one of those tools where once you own one and you use one, you just ask yourself, how did you ever do anything before? Maybe you did something before by using, pliers like this, and you can really firmly grip something while you solder. Or maybe you still do what I do, where you take a roll of solder and you put some sticky tack on the top and you let everything sit on there, and it works pretty good. No doubt, it's here because I still use it. But there's something about a vise that is just categorically different, and it's hard to understand their value until you've had one in your shop or your sewing room or your craft room or whatever for 6 months. Okay, so I already knew the value of a vise because I own several, and I had this smaller PanaVise that I gave to my nephew that I wasn't totally thrilled with, and I considered buying this bigger one for this project and for others. And I'm glad that I did, although there's a couple things that I don't like, and I'll get to those just in a moment. So what I do like is that it is quite heavy on its own, and so it doesn't move around that much if it's not mounted. I have mounted this before on a board, and that's a nice feature that they allow you, or that they put that in there. And this thing can be added to numerous bases, bigger bases that collect all the bits and pieces that fall off while you're soldering, and also a base that allows you to have your solder on a spool and some other things. I think in that sense, it's pretty versatile, and I like that. The screw and mechanism itself is pretty good. So if you're not familiar with backlash, that's basically when you're tightening how much slop is there before you start going backward. And I've taken a brief measurement. So this would be about 90 degrees. This would be about 45. So it's about 20 degrees, something like that. And for a relatively cheap, relatively non-precise tool, this isn't a machinist's caliper or anything like that, I think it's pretty good, and it's better than a lot of other vices that I've used. The jaws seem to hold up really well over time when you hit them with the soldering iron. I don't exactly know their material, but they are replaceable, although I don't know if they sell replacements. I haven't looked into that, but they have held up pretty good for, hot soldering iron work. The main thing that I dislike is the way that this has been designed, it's good in the sense that if this is mounted down, if you loosen this knob, you can pivot, and you can also pivot this way, and you can also drop the head, and so you can get into a lot of different positions, and I appreciate that about them. This is also removable, so you can put different pieces in here. The machining is not like lab grade quality, but neither is the price. And so I think it's sufficient. What I dislike is that I typically am holding the soldering iron with one hand, and then I'm making adjustments with the other hand. And very often when I find myself in the position where this knob's over here and this knob's over here. It's very rare that I have it like this. And part of the reason I don't have it like this is because the knobs run into each other. And in my opinion, that's a bad design. You may notice that when this knob, the black knob, is all the way reefed down, there's all of this excess. So they could have sunk the black handle onto the screw more, or just shortened the screw entirely. They could have changed the length of this thing. They could have had this thing go in at an angle. I mean, there's a bunch of different ways to solve this, and unfortunately they didn't do that. And so I always find myself with this somehow offset. And normally what I find myself doing is operating, I operate with the right hand, I'm right-handed, And so this is over here on the left, which my other hand normally has something. But the main thing that I don't like is when I'm operating this with my right hand, I can't bring this towards me like that. In order for you to be able to do that, this has to be over here. So you can do this, but then you run into the issue that this is running into it. So it's just, that annoys me. And maybe it won't annoy you. That's totally fine. Maybe I'm being picky, but I would give this vise, let's call it a 95%. If it was taking a history test, I'd give it a 95%. I think the price is fair. I think the quality is as good as it needs to be. Of course, anything could be made better, but then the price goes up and it's not worth it for a hobbyist. But this is just the thing that really kind of drives me nuts. I also think that one possible improvement for some people could be that instead of this just being a post, there being a screw at the bottom that holds like a washer on, and then this go all the way through so that you can't pull it off like that on your own. Depending on how often you're adjusting that, maybe that's an issue. They could have easily solved that by giving you access here with a screw, which holds this post captive, but I can't really say that I'm complaining about that personally as a user. My main issue, as I said, is that these knobs are basically always offset, because if not, they run into each other. So yeah, the jaws line up really nicely. The alignment is quite good. That's something that's often not good on a cheap equipment. And when I say cheap equipment, what I mean is I worked as an engineer, I worked as a mechanic, and I've used lab grade, basically, you know, finest built Japanese, German, American equipment money can buy. And to me, in that context, this is cheap. This is, you know, hobby grade, consumer grade, homer grade. And that's totally fine. And I respect that. But that's why I say cheap. I don't mean to be rude to them. I did clean and lubricate the screw and clean and lubricate these posts. There was a little bit of junk on it, and it worked quite a bit better afterwards. And the throat or the clearance is something like 3 fingers. I don't have a ruler with me, but I've never really needed it to be that far open. So yeah, the operation is smooth. I'm satisfied with that. And since we are giving away everything we have and moving and going out on the road, I think I'm going to leave this here in Detroit for my dad, and he's going to use it for non-electronic stuff, because it does make just a really good hobby grade vise for electronics or for anything else. So all right, I hope that was helpful. I hope you found it to be honest. And yeah, if you didn't, I'm not sure why you're still watching, but give this thing a thumbs down so that I know I won't make more content like this. But in the meantime, I wish you well. God bless. Happy New Year. Have a great rest of your day.